a married former special education teacher, has been spared from prison time after admitting to victimizing a teenage student in St. James, Missouri. According to investigators, 26-year-old Rikki Lynn Laughlin sent illicit images and a video of herself to the victim on Snapchat. She also solicited inappropriate photos of the victim and tried pressuring him into having intercourse with her. The crimes occurred over a roughly 6-week period, started in September of 2023, when Laughlin was employed at St. James High School in Marys County. Laughlin fell under investigation after authorities received a tip about an inappropriate student-teacher relationship from law enforcement officials in a neighboring county. Court documents state that the victim told investigators that things progressed fast after he and Laughlin began interacting on Snapchat, and that the two had kissed, but that he made excuses not to go all the way with her because he felt uncomfortable. Laughlin was originally charged with a slew of felonies related to her alleged conduct, including possession of illegal images of the victim, tampering or attempting to tamper with a victim in a felony prosecution, exploitation of a minor, tampering with physical evidence in a felony prosecution, and child trafficking. On July 24th, she pleaded guilty to first-degree endangering the welfare of a child, creating substantial risk. Prosecutors dropped the more serious charges in exchange for her plea, and she was sentenced to 5 years of probation. Number 12. Lori Vallow Daybell. Infamously known as the Doomsday Mom, 52-year-old Lori Vallow Daybell had been sentenced in Arizona for 2 additional murders while serving life for the 2019 murders of her 2 children. Vallow Daybell and her husband, Chad Daybell, originally made news headlines after Lori's children from previous relationships, Joshua J.J. Vallow and Tylee Ryan, vanished in September of 2019. While investigating the children's disappearances months later, FBI agents discovered text messages between the couple about their cult-like beliefs, including that JJ and Tylee had turned into possessed zombies. In June of 2020, police excavated Chad Daybell's yard and discovered the victim's murdered bodies. Chad is currently on death row for Tylee and JJ's murders, while Lori is in the process of appealing her conviction and life sentence. In July of 2019, just months before Tylee and JJ's deaths, Vallow Daybell's estranged husband, Charles Vallow, had been fatally shot in his Phoenix area home by Vallow Daybell's brother, Alex Cox. Authorities charged Vallow Daybell for her role in the crime, and she was also implicated in the attempted murder of her niece's ex-husband, Brandon Boudreaux, who narrowly avoided being shot while driving in Gilbert, Arizona, in October of 2019. She was found guilty of 2 conspiracy charges in connection with both cases earlier this year and was sentenced to 2 life terms on July 25th. Number 11. Brett Hankison. A former Louisville, Kentucky police officer will spend the next 33 months in prison for his role in the death of 26-year-old Breonna Taylor, who was fatally shot by law enforcement during a raid on her home in March of 2020. Mistaking the police as intruders, Taylor's boyfriend Kenneth Walker fired a single warning shot when police went to serve a search warrant on the property in relation to a drug-related investigation, striking Officer Jonathan Mattingly. Mattingly and 2 other officers, Brett Hankison and Miles Cosgrove, fired dozens of shots in return, killing Taylor. 10 of the gunshots were fired by Hankison, who was found guilty of depriving Taylor of her civil rights following a federal trial in November of 2024. Prosecutors accuse Hankison of depriving Taylor of the right to freedom from unreasonable searches and seizures and the right to be free from deprivation of liberty without due process of law. No one was injured by Hankison's gunshots, who was acquitted by the same jury of violating the civil rights of 3 of Taylor's neighbors. The judge sentenced Hankison to 2 years and 9 months behind bars, far exceeding the prosecution's recommendation of 1 day in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. Number 10. Emil Holaj. An elderly Australian man thought he had scored big when he discovered a designer bag of missing money on a passenger train outside Sydney, but he ran into serious legal trouble instead. 74-year-old Emil Holaj was traveling to Glenfield on July 2nd when he spotted the bag and snatched more than $26,000 out of it. The money's rightful owner contacted the authorities after realizing that their bag had gone missing, but by the time investigators identified Holaj and arrested him, At his Rossmore home the following day, he had gambled away roughly $2,000 of the ill-gotten proceeds. The remaining $24,000 was recovered and Holaj was released on bail after being charged with larceny and theft. On July 24th, the court sentenced him to 9 months of community correction and ordered him to repay the money he had gambled away. Number 9. Christian Valdez. 29-year-old Ada Blake's life was forever changed in March of 2024 when her ex-boyfriend Christian Valdez shoved her in front of an oncoming New York City subway train at the Fulton Street subway station in Manhattan. During an argument, suffering from severe injuries including multiple rib fractures, a blood clot in her lungs, she was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors amputated both her legs. At the time of the attack, Valdez was on parole for stabbing a woman and her young daughter. In 2020, he had removed his ankle monitor the day prior to the crime and fled to New Jersey immediately afterward, only to be arrested in Brooklyn later that day after returning to New York City. Valdez, who is now 36 years old, pleaded guilty to attempted second-degree murder in June. In late July, he was sentenced to 18 years in prison, followed by 5 years of post-release supervision. Blake delivered a compelling victim impact statement during the sentencing hearing, describing how her life has changed after losing her legs and feet and how she'll never feel safe riding the subway again. Number 8. Isaiah Perez. A college wrestler turned criminal will spend 3 years in a California state prison after drugging and assaulting an underage victim nearly 5 years ago. 25-year-old former Fresno State student athlete Isaiah Perez was accused of getting the victim intoxicated on alcohol and drugs before forcing himself on her at an off-campus apartment building in November of 2020. He maintained his innocence but was dismissed from his wrestling team following his arrest in early 2021. Perez continued to deny the allegations while out on bond for the next 3 years as prosecutors prepared to take the case to trial. He could have faced a life sentence if convicted as charged, but he decided to plead no contest to battery and unlawful intercourse charges as his trial loomed. During his sentencing hearing on July 30th, Perez apologized for his actions, stating that he was young, reckless, and tremendously dumb when he committed the assault. He asked the court for mercy, stating that he did not want one mistake to define him, and his defense attorney urged the court to sentence him to probation. The judge promptly denied the request and imposed a 3-year prison term in accordance with the victim's wishes that Perez serve time in custody. Number 7. Deborah Mason. A drug-trafficking British grandmother has been sentenced to 2 decades in prison for moving more than a ton of cocaine across the UK over a 7-month period, starting in April of 2023. Nicknamed the Queen Bee and also known as the Gangster Granny, 65-year-old Deborah Mason and several of her relatives ran a $107 million narcotics ring by importing the drugs and distributing them throughout London, Bristol, Birmingham, Cardiff, and Leicester via couriers. She used the illicit proceeds to fund a lavish lifestyle, which included designer merchandise and plastic surgery in Turkey. The cartel was foiled by the Metropolitan Police Service, who spent months conducting surveillance and combing through cell phone data and other evidence. 11 defendants were convicted of various crimes for their roles in the operation, and on July 18th, they received prison sentences ranging from 10 to 20 years. Mason received the longest prison term, while her daughter, 29-year-old Roseanne Mason, was sentenced to 11 years behind bars. Number 6. Michael Lewis. A Texas man who stalked and harassed an Indiana Fever basketball star has been sentenced to prison time after pleading guilty to criminal charges. 55-year-old Michael Lewis sent Caitlin Clark hundreds of threatening and explicit messages online over a month-long period leading up to his arrest in January in Indianapolis, causing the victim to change her appearance out of a fear for her safety. He was taken into custody just a mile from where Clark's team plays, but denied that his conduct was threatening in nature while telling police that he had an imaginary relationship with the victim. Lewis was sentenced to the maximum 2.5-year prison term for his crimes as part of a plea deal, but the judge nearly revoked the agreement due to his remarks during his sentencing hearing on July 28th. He reportedly continued to deny threatening Clark while claiming he was concerned for the athlete's safety, prompting the court to remind him that he was required to take accountability for his actions. In addition to serving time behind bars, Lewis was ordered to have no contact with Clark and has been banned from attending any and all future Indiana Fever games. Number 5. Bryan Kohberger. a quadruple murderer who massacred 4 college students in their sleep, has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole after pleading guilty to avoid the death penalty in what has infamously become known as the University of Idaho murders. 30-year-old criminology PhD student Bryan Kohberger entered the victim's Moscow, Idaho home during the early morning hours of November 13, 2022, and fatally stabbed 20-year-old Ethan Chapman, 21-year-old Casey Goncalves, 20-year-old Xana Knodl, and 21-year-old Madison Mogan. Kohberger was arrested at his family's Albrightsville, Pennsylvania home more than a month later after being connected to the crime through DNA on a knife sheath that had been left behind at the crime scene. He was extradited to Idaho, where he initially refused to enter a plea to his charges, which included 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. In June of 2023, prosecutors announced their intention to seek the death penalty against Kohberger, who continued to fight the case while being held without bond. In early July of 2024, roughly a month before his trial was scheduled to begin, he pleaded guilty as charged in exchange for 4 consecutive life sentences. In addition to being spared from capital punishment, Kohberger managed to avoid explaining his reasons for committing the murders. The plea deal also prevented the public from learning details about the case that would have likely come out during a trial. Kohberger declined to make a statement during his sentencing hearing and did not apologize for his actions. Number 4. Francisco Severo Torres. A Massachusetts man has been spared from any additional time behind bars after spending 2 years in pre-trial detention for trying to open a passenger airplane's emergency exit and attempting to stab a United Airlines flight attendant. 35-year-old Francisco Severo Torres was arrested in March of 2023 after embarking on the mid-flight meltdown less than an hour before his plane was due to touch down in Boston. A flight attendant confronted Torres after noticing that the emergency door handle had been disarmed, but was met with an uncooperative response, prompting the crew member to notify the captain that the plane needed to land as soon as possible due to a security threat. Footage captured by a witness showed Torres being tackled and restrained by crew members and passengers after threatening to kill every man on the plane and charging at a flight attendant with a broken spoon. He was arrested as soon as the aircraft landed and was indicted on federal charges relating to the incident. 6 months later, in May of this year, Torres pleaded guilty to 1 count of interference and attempted interference with flight crew members and attendants using a dangerous weapon. He was sentenced to time served and 5 years of supervised release, during which time he's banned from traveling on commercial flights. Number 3. Linda McCullough. A former public official for the small Ohio town of Vienna has been sentenced to 8 years in prison after abusing her position to steal more than $116,000 from the public coffers. Linda McCullough, who served as the unincorporated community's fiscal officer over a 5-year period started in 2019, fell under investigation after an audit revealed a $1.3 million budget shortfall. She resigned during the investigation and was subsequently charged with 10 counts including theft in office, telecommunications fraud, and tampering with evidence. According to an indictment, McCullough used the stolen money to pay her credit card bills and other personal expenses. Court documents state that she concealed her theft by altering the township's financial records. McCullough pleaded guilty to all 10 charges earlier this year as her impending trial loomed. She apologized during her sentencing hearing on July 30th and pleaded with the court for mercy, stating that her personality can come across as cold and uncaring because she's bad at expressing her feelings. But the judge took no mercy on her, noting the defendant's apparent lack of remorse while imposing the 8-year prison term. Number 2. Christina Marie Chapman. An Arizona woman will spend nearly a decade in federal prison following her conviction for running a fraudulent foreign worker scam to the benefit of the North Korean regime over a 3-year period starting in 2020. 50-year-old Christina Marie Chapman helped North Korean citizens get remote IT jobs for more than 300 companies while posing as U.S. citizens, stealing the identities of 68 American victims in the process and generating proceeds to the tune of $17 million. As part of the illicit operation, Chapman received and hosted a so-called laptop farm of computers from the companies she defrauded. She sent at least 49 devices to a Chinese city along the North Korean border and more than 90 laptops were recovered during a raid on her home in 2023. Authorities did not specifically name the victims, which included a major TV network, a Fortune 500 company, and a Silicon Valley tech company. In February of this year, Chapman pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, and conspiracy to launder monetary instruments. She was sentenced to a 102-month federal prison term in July and has also been ordered to forfeit and pay more than $460,000 worth of ill-gotten profits and fines. Number 1. Athanassios Kourelis. A Greek convicted killer will spend the rest of his life in prison for murdering his former partner outside a police station after she reported his abusive behavior to law enforcement. 40-year-old Athanassios Kourelis fatally stabbed 28-year-old Kyriaki Griva in the Athens suburb of Agio Anagyroi in April of 2024. After monitoring her movements via a smartwatch he had gifted her. Griva's death sparked outrage among civilians who criticized the police for denying help to the victim just minutes before she was killed, and Kourelis was found guilty of homicide, along with drug and weapon charges. Despite his plea for diminished responsibility due to alleged mental health issues, his conviction came earlier this year after prosecutors accused Kourelis of acting with sobriety and determination and in a calm, calculated manner. Authorities also argued that the defendant took measures to feign mental instability in an attempt to corroborate his diminished responsibility plea. Kourelis showed no emotion during his sentencing hearing on July 29th, as the judge imposed a life term plus 5 years, bringing long-awaited justice to Griva's family and marking a victory in the ongoing fight against femicide in Greece. Thanks for watching. Would you rather go to prison for 1 year today or for 2 years in 10 years from now, and why?